The Deep Space Communication Array on the UES Defiance picked up something strange at Aero 347 hours. Commander Jake Morrison was drinking his third cup of coffee when Chief Communications Officer Lisa Barnes called him over to her station. The signal was weak and broken, but it was definitely coming from outside human space. Jake leaned over Lisa's shoulder and watched the data stream across her monitor. The transmission was unlike anything they had ever received before. It used mathematical patterns that seemed familiar yet completely alien at the same time. Lisa worked her fingers across the control panel, trying to clean up the signal and make sense of what they were hearing. Captain Ryan Cole arrived on the bridge within minutes of being called. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Ryan had been commanding deep space missions for over 20 years, but he had never seen anything like this signal. The transmission seemed to pulse with desperation and fear. The UES Defiance was humanity's most advanced deep space exploration vessel. It carried a crew of 800 and was equipped with the latest scanning technology and defensive systems. They had been on a routine patrol mission near the edge of human territory when the signal reached them. Now everything had changed. Lisa managed to isolate parts of the transmission and run them through the ship's translation computers. The results were disturbing. Words like help and dying and please came through clearly. There were also references to something called the Galactic Federation and an enemy known as the Harvesters. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he listened to the translated fragments. Someone out there was calling for help, and they were calling specifically to Earth. The signal was directed toward human space with a precision that suggested the senders knew exactly where humanity lived. Ryan ordered all departments to report to battle stations, while Lisa continued working on the signal. The ship's science officer, Dr. Amanda Scott, arrived on the bridge with her tablet full of data. She had been analyzing the signal's origin point, and her findings were remarkable. The transmission was coming from a star system over 300 light-years away. The signal had been traveling for centuries before reaching human space. Amanda explained that whoever sent the message had aimed it at Earth's projected position in the galaxy, accounting for stellar drift and orbital mechanics. This level of astronomical knowledge suggested a highly advanced civilization. As Lisa cleaned up more of the signal, the full scope of the message became clear. The Galactic Federation was a collection of 17 different alien species who had formed a peaceful alliance. They had been living in harmony for thousands of years until something called the Harvesters appeared. The Harvesters were described as biomechanical creatures that consumed entire worlds. They did not negotiate or show mercy. They simply arrived at a planet and stripped it of all life and resources before moving on to the next target. The Federation had tried everything to stop them, but nothing worked. Jake listened to the translated message with growing horror. Entire star systems had been consumed. Billions of aliens had died. The Federation's military forces had been shattered in battle after battle. They were facing complete extinction, and they had nowhere else to turn. What made the message even more disturbing was why it had been sent to Earth. The Federation had somehow learned about humanity through intercepted communications and deep space observations. They called humans the Deathworld species because Earth was more dangerous than any planet they had ever encountered. The Federation scientists had studied Earth's history and been amazed by humanity's ability to survive and thrive in such a hostile environment. They had learned about human wars and conflicts and realized that humans had developed fighting skills unlike any other species in the galaxy. Ryan called an emergency meeting in the ship's conference room. The senior officers gathered around the table while Lisa continued monitoring the alien transmission. The message was still coming through, but it was getting weaker as the Federation's transmitters failed one by one. Dr. Scott presented her analysis of the Federation's technology. Based on the signal characteristics, she estimated that the aliens were more advanced than humans in many areas, but they seemed to lack military technology. Their ships appeared to be designed for exploration and trade rather than warfare. Jake studied the star charts showing the Federation's territory. Over 40 star systems had already been consumed by the Harvesters, and the enemy was expanding faster each month. At their current rate of advance, the Harvesters would consume the entire Federation within 2 years. The implications were staggering. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the answer, and their new neighbors were dying. The Federation was calling for help from a species they had never met, based only on rumors about human military capabilities. Ryan made the decision to forward the entire message to Earth immediately. Admiral Kate Phillips and the United Earth Council needed to know about this situation right away. The transmission would take several hours to reach Earth, but time was critical. Lisa managed to establish a weak two-way communication link with the Federation. The response came from someone who identified himself as Admiral Zethkara of the Villani people. His message was brief but desperate. The Harvesters had just attacked another Federation world, and millions more aliens were dead. Admiral Zethkara explained that the Federation had been trying to contact Earth for months. They had sent dozens of messages, but only a few had gotten through the interference caused by Harvester jamming technology. The aliens were amazed that humans had actually received their call for help. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity was being asked to enter a war that had already lasted decades. The Federation was offering to share their scientific knowledge in exchange for human military assistance. They believed that human combat experience might be the key to defeating the Harvesters. The conference room fell silent as the officers considered their options. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers, but they understood the magnitude of what they were facing. Somewhere across the galaxy, an entire civilization was fighting for survival against an enemy that showed no mercy. Ryan ordered the ship to change course toward Earth immediately. The Defiance would carry the Federation's message directly to Admiral Phillips and the Earth government. Humanity would have to decide whether to risk everything to save aliens they had never met. As the ship turned toward home, Jake looked out at the stars and wondered what humanity's answer would be. The galaxy was bigger and more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Soon they would discover if humans were ready to become the defenders of worlds they had never seen. The emergency session of the United Earth Council lasted 18 hours. Admiral Kate Phillips stood before the assembled representatives from every nation on Earth as they debated humanity's response to the Federation's desperate plea for help. The holographic display showed the alien message playing over and over while translators worked to perfect every word. President Helen Carter called for order as arguments broke out across the council chamber. Some representatives wanted to send aid immediately, while others worried about the risks of getting involved in an alien war. The Federation had offered to share their advanced technology, but many humans questioned whether it was worth the danger. Admiral Phillips presented the military analysis that her staff had prepared overnight. The Federation controlled over 200 star systems spread across a region of space larger than human territory. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth in many areas, including faster-than-light travel and energy production. However, their military capabilities appeared to be extremely limited. Dr. Amanda Scott from the UES Defiance provided details about the Harvester threat through a secure communication link. The enemy was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. They were part biological and part machine with a collective intelligence that coordinated attacks across multiple star systems. The Harvesters consumed everything in their path and left dead worlds behind. General Sam Hughes studied the tactical information that the Federation had provided. The aliens had been fighting the Harvesters for over 50 years and had never won a major battle. Their strategies seemed to focus on evacuation and retreat rather than direct confrontation. Human military doctrine was completely different and based on aggressive offensive action. The debate continued through the night as more information arrived from Federation space. Admiral Zeth Kara sent detailed reports about recent harvester attacks that painted a grim picture of the war's progress. Entire species within the Federation were now extinct, and many others were down to their last few thousand survivors. Colonel Ben Torres raised concerns about humanity's ability to fight an enemy so far from Earth. The logistics of moving ships and supplies across such vast distances would be enormous. Earth's military was designed to defend the solar system, not project power, hundreds of light years away. They would need to build an entirely new type of space fleet. President Carter listened to all the arguments before making her decision. She announced that humanity would respond to the Federation's call for help, but the mission would be voluntary. Any military personnel who wanted to participate could volunteer for the expedition, while others would remain to defend Earth. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of the announcement, over 2 million military personnel from every branch of service had volunteered for the mission. Admiral Phillips was forced to establish selection criteria because they simply could not transport that many people. Federation space. Construction began immediately on a new class of warships designed specifically for long-range combat operations. The UES Retribution and UES Vengeance were the first ships completed using a combination of human engineering and Federation technology provided through their communications link. The alien scientists were amazed by how quickly humans adapted their designs for military purposes. Captain Ryan Cole was chosen to command the first human fleet to make contact with the Federation. His ship, the UES Defiance, would be joined by 24 other vessels carrying diplomats, scientists, and military advisors. The journey to Federation space would take 3 weeks, using the new faster-than-light drives. Jake Morrison received a promotion to commander and was put in charge of the expedition's security forces. He spent days studying everything the Federation had shared about harvester tactics and capabilities. The enemy seemed to rely on overwhelming numbers and biological weapons that could consume metal and organic matter equally well. Dr. Scott was assigned to lead the scientific exchange program with Federation researchers. She would work to understand alien technology while sharing human knowledge about defensive systems and weapons design. The cultural differences between humans and Federation species were expected to be significant. Lisa Barnes became the primary communications officer for the entire expedition. She had successfully established regular contact with Admiral Zeth Kara and several other Federation military commanders. The aliens were eager to meet humans in person and learn about their combat experience. The departure ceremony was broadcast across Earth as the human fleet prepared to leave for Federation space. President Carter gave a speech about humanity's responsibility to help others in need, while Admiral Phillips promised that the mission would not leave Earth defenseless. Jake felt nervous excitement as the fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed. They were about to make first contact with an alien civilization and possibly fight in the largest war the galaxy had ever seen. The Federation had provided coordinates for a meeting point near the edge of their territory where they would be safe from harvester attack. The journey gave the human crew time to study everything they knew about their new allies. The Federation included species with widely different biologies and cultures, but they all shared a commitment to peaceful cooperation. Many had never experienced warfare before the harvesters arrived and were unprepared for the brutality of the conflict. Commander Torres conducted training exercises during the flight to prepare his Marines for combat in alien environments. The harvesters were known to use toxic atmospheres and biological weapons that could kill most Federation species within minutes. Human equipment would need significant modifications to be effective. When the fleet finally dropped out of faster than light speed, they found themselves in a star system devastated by war. Debris from destroyed ships floated in space, while the remains of orbital stations drifted like broken toys. In the distance, they could see the surviving Federation fleet, waiting for their arrival. Admiral Zeth Kara's flagship was unlike anything humans had ever seen. The vessel was organic in appearance, with flowing curves and surfaces that seemed to pulse with internal light. It was beautiful but clearly not designed for combat. The Federation ships looked more like works of art than military vessels. Captain. Cole established communication with the alien admiral and arranged for the first face-to-face meeting between humans and Federation representatives. A small shuttle would carry Jake and Dr. Scott to the alien flagship, while Admiral Zeth Kara prepared to meet the representatives of the species he hoped would save his people. Jake checked his equipment one final time as the shuttle approached, the Federation vessel. In a few minutes, he would become one of the first humans to meet an alien being. The galaxy was about to change forever, and humanity would never be the same. The shuttle bay doors on Admiral Zeth Kara's flagship opened to reveal an interior that looked more like a garden than a military vessel. Living walls pulsed with soft bioluminescent light, while the floor felt spongy beneath Jake's boots. Dr. Scott recorded everything with her scanner as they followed their alien escort through corridors that curved and branched like the inside of a tree. Admiral Zeth Kara waited for them in what appeared to be a command center, though it bore no resemblance to anything on a human ship. The Vellani leader was tall and slender with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that showed intelligence and deep exhaustion. His uniform seemed to be grown rather than manufactured and moved with his body like a second skin. Jake extended his hand in greeting but quickly realized the gesture meant nothing to the alien admiral. Zeth Kara touched his own chest and then reached toward Jake with long fingers that barely made contact with the human's shoulder. Dr. Scott explained later that many alien species avoided physical contact with strangers for biological safety reasons. The first conversation between humans and aliens was awkward but historic. Zeth Kara spoke through a translation device that turned his musical language into stilted English. He thanked the humans for responding to the Federation's call and explained that many of his people had given up hope of survival. Jake was struck by how fragile the aliens seemed compared to humans. Zeth Kara's bones were visible through his thin skin, and his movements were graceful but weak. The other Federation officers in the room appeared similarly delicate, with features that suggested they had evolved on worlds with low gravity and abundant resources. Dr. Scott began documenting the different alien species represented on the ship. There were the tall blue Vellani like Admiral Zeth Kara, plus shorter gray beings called Kethron, and floating jellyfish-like creatures known as the Melody. Each species had evolved differently, but none showed the physical strength and endurance that humans possessed. The Admiral led them to a holographic display that showed the current state of the war. Red markers indicated star systems that had been consumed by the Harvesters, while yellow showed systems under attack. The blue areas representing safe Federation territory were shrinking rapidly. Jake counted over 60 systems that had fallen since the first distress signal was sent to Earth. Zeth Kara explained that the Harvesters had appeared suddenly 53 years ago from outside the galaxy. They had ignored all attempts at communication and had begun systematically consuming every world they encountered. The Federation's peaceful nature had made them completely unprepared for such an enemy. The alien military technology was impressive in many ways, but clearly not designed for warfare. Their ships had powerful shields and advanced sensors, but their weapons were intended for precision strikes against specific targets. The idea of overwhelming firepower and massive destruction was foreign to Federation thinking. Jake learned that the Federation had never experienced large-scale warfare before the Harvesters arrived. Most conflicts between species had been resolved through negotiation and compromise. The concept of total war was something they struggled to understand, even as their worlds burned around them. Dr. Scott studied the Federation's medical technology and was amazed by their abilities to heal injuries and extend life. However, she noticed that the aliens seemed to have no experience with trauma medicine or combat injuries. Their peaceful history had not prepared them for the realities of war. The Harvesters themselves remained largely mysterious even after decades of fighting. They appeared to be a fusion of organic and mechanical components controlled by a collective intelligence. Individual harvester units showed no fear or self-preservation instincts and would sacrifice themselves without hesitation to achieve their objectives. Admiral Zethkara showed them recordings of harvester attacks that had been captured by Federation reconnaissance drones. The enemy moved with disturbing coordination and seemed to anticipate Federation tactics before they were implemented. Their ships were dark, angular things that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Jake watched the recordings with growing anger. The harvesters showed no mercy to civilian populations and consumed everything in their path, including children and non-combatants. They were not interested in conquest or occupation, but in complete consumption of all life and resources. The Federation had tried every possible diplomatic solution, including offering to share their technology and even surrender entire systems in exchange for peace. The harvesters had ignored every attempt at communication and had simply continued their advance across Federation space. Colonel Torres arrived on the flagship with a team of human military advisors to assess Federation defensive capabilities. He was shocked to discover that the aliens had no concept of strategic depth or defensive fortifications. Their military doctrine was based on mobility and retreat rather than standing and fighting. The cultural differences became more apparent as the day progressed. Federation species had evolved as prey animals or peaceful herbivores on worlds where cooperation was essential for survival. They struggled to understand human concepts like controlled aggression and tactical violence. Dr. Scott explained to Admiral Zethkara that humans had evolved differently on a world where predators and natural disasters had shaped their development. Earth had taught humanity to fight for survival and to never give up even when facing overwhelming odds. This made humans unusual among intelligent species. The Admiral was particularly interested in human military history and asked many questions about Earth's wars and conflicts. He seemed amazed that humans had fought so many battles against their own species yet had managed to unite when facing an external threat. Jake demonstrated some basic human combat techniques using a training dummy that the Federation provided. The alien officers watched in fascination as he showed them moves designed to disable or kill an opponent quickly and efficiently. They had never seen anything like human martial arts. The meeting continued for hours as both sides shared information and began planning their next moves. The Federation needed time to evacuate their remaining civilian populations, while the humans needed to understand the full scope of the harvester threat. As the day ended, Jake realized that humanity had inherited a war that was already nearly lost. The Federation had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and their remaining forces were demoralized and scattered. The harvesters controlled most of the galaxy and were advancing faster each month. However, Jake also saw something that gave him hope. The aliens had never encountered anything like human military thinking, and neither had the harvesters. Humanity's arrival would change the nature of the war in ways that no one could predict. News of the galactic crisis reached Earth within hours of the first contact meeting and triggered the largest military mobilization in human history. President Helen Carter addressed the world from the United Nations building in New York as representatives from every nation gathered to discuss humanity's response to the alien threat. General Sam Hughes was recalled from retirement and given command of what would become known as the Galactic Defense Initiative. He had spent 40 years planning for wars that never came, but now faced a conflict that would determine the survival of multiple civilizations. His first order was to begin immediate production of warships designed specifically for fighting. The harvesters, Admiral Kate Phillips, coordinated with every major military power on Earth to pool their resources and expertise. The Chinese contributed their advanced manufacturing capabilities, while the Americans provided orbital shipyard technology. European nations shared their research on energy weapons, and the Russians offered their experience with long-range logistics. Dr. Patricia Ellis led a team of engineers who worked around the clock to design new weapons systems based on Federation intelligence about harvester vulnerabilities. The aliens had discovered that the enemy was susceptible to certain types of electromagnetic radiation, but had never been able to weaponize this knowledge effectively. The difference in military thinking became clear immediately. Where the Federation had tried to develop precise surgical strikes that would disable harvester units without causing collateral damage, humans planned for overwhelming firepower that would obliterate entire enemy formations. The concept of total destruction was foreign to alien thinking, but natural to human warfare. Lieutenant Commander Alex Fisher was assigned to train Federation forces in human combat doctrine at a facility established on the Moon. The alien soldiers who volunteered for the program struggled with concepts that came naturally to humans, such as controlled aggression and the willingness to take casualties to achieve victory. The Federation officers were amazed by human training, methods that seemed designed to break down individuals and rebuild them as warriors. Their own military training focused on cooperation and defensive tactics, rather than the offensive mindset that humans considered essential for victory. Captain Maria Santos led reconnaissance missions deep into Harvester territory using ships, equipped with advanced stealth technology. Her reports painted a disturbing picture of the enemy's capabilities and revealed that they had consumed over 60 star systems since the war began. The Harvesters had established massive processing facilities on conquered worlds where they converted organic matter into fuel for their expansion. These facilities were protected by swarms of smaller craft that attacked anything that came within range. The enemy showed no concern for their own losses and would sacrifice hundreds of units to destroy a single Federation ship. Human intelligence. Analysts studied every piece of data about the Harvesters and began developing new tactical approaches based on their findings. The enemy's collective intelligence was both a strength and a weakness because destroying key nodes could disrupt their coordination across multiple star systems. Dr. Ellis's engineering teams produced their first prototypes within weeks of receiving Federation technology specifications. The new human warships combined alien defensive systems with weapons designed to deliver maximum destruction. Ships like the UES Warhammer and UES Devastator were built to survive in close combat and deliver overwhelming firepower. The production lines on Earth and in the asteroid belt worked continuously to build the fleet that would carry human forces to the war zone. Every major corporation contributed to the effort as humanity prepared to take their violent nature to an enemy that had never faced anything like it. General Hughes established training facilities across the solar system where human forces learned to fight in alien environments. The Harvesters used biological weapons that could consume metal and organic matter, but human equipment was designed to resist such attacks through redundant systems and aggressive countermeasures. Admiral Phillips received regular updates from the war zone where Federation forces continued to lose ground to the advancing Harvesters. Entire species were now down to their last few thousand survivors, while others had gone extinct in the past month. Time was running out for the Galactic civilization. Jake Morrison returned to Earth aboard a fast courier ship to brief human commanders on the tactical situation. He explained that the Federation military was essentially broken and that their remaining forces were scattered across dozens of star systems with no central coordination. The briefing sessions revealed the scope of the challenge facing humanity. The Harvesters controlled most of the galaxy and had resources that dwarfed anything Earth could produce. However, they had never faced an enemy that fought with human intensity and willingness to accept casualties. Colonel Ben. Torres presented plans for Operation Deathblow, which would coordinate simultaneous attacks against every known Harvester facility. The strategy was simple in its brutality and involved hitting everything at once with maximum force until nothing remained. Federation representatives were shocked by the level of destruction humans were prepared to inflict. Dr. Scott's analysis of Harvester biology revealed weak points that could be exploited by human weapons. The enemy's collective intelligence relied on biological networks that could be disrupted by specific types of electromagnetic pulse. Human engineers immediately began developing weapons to exploit this vulnerability. The first human battle fleet was ready for deployment within 6 months of the initial contact. Admiral Cole would command the assault force, while General Hughes coordinated the overall campaign from Earth. The fleet included over 200 warships and carried 50,000 human Marines trained specifically for combat against the Harvesters. President Carter gave the final authorization for humanity's entry into the Galactic War during a ceremony broadcast across Earth. She spoke about the responsibility that came with humanity's military capabilities and the obligation to defend those who could not defend themselves. The departure was witnessed by billions of people as the largest military fleet in human history prepared to jump to faster-than-light speed. Jake felt the weight of expectation as he stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched Earth disappear behind them. The human fleet carried weapons and tactics that the galaxy had never seen before. They were going to war with an enemy that had terrorized entire civilizations for decades, but had never faced the organized violence that humans could bring to bear. As the ships jumped into faster-than-light travel, Jake knew that the war would change everything. Either humanity would save the galaxy, or they would die trying, but they would fight with an intensity that would shock both their allies and their enemies. The human fleet arrived at the edge of Harvester territory to find a galaxy in flames. Intelligence reports from Agent Nicole Turner revealed that the enemy had established their primary processing facility in a system called Nexus Prime, where they converted consumed worlds into fuel for their continued expansion. General Hughes made the decision that this facility would be their primary target. Admiral Ryan Cole stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution as the largest military fleet in galactic history prepared for the final assault. Over 300 human warships had joined with the surviving Federation forces to create an armada that stretched across space like a steel constellation. The alien ships looked fragile next to the brutal efficiency of human military engineering. The battle plan was everything the Federation had feared, and everything humanity excelled at. Operation Deathblow would hit every Harvester position simultaneously with overwhelming force designed to completely destroy the enemy rather than simply defeat them. Human doctrine demanded total victory and the elimination of any threat to future peace. Captain Derek Walsh commanded the assault group tasked with attacking the central processing facility. His ship, the UES Devastator, carried enough firepower to level a small moon and was escorted by dozens of smaller craft designed for close combat operations. The Harvesters had never faced anything like human military technology combined with alien defensive systems. The first wave of attacks began at coordinates across Harvester space as human forces demonstrated tactics that shocked their alien allies. Where Federation ships had always tried to minimize casualties and preserve infrastructure, humans targeted everything that moved with weapons designed for maximum destruction. Sergeant Linda Moore led boarding parties against Harvester vessels, using combat techniques that seemed impossible to the watching aliens. Human soldiers fought the enemy in hand-to-hand combat within their own ships, showing no fear of creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for decades. The psychological impact on Federation forces was enormous. Corporal Tony Garcia became famous among alien troops when video recordings showed him standing alone against a group of Harvester warriors while his squad evacuated wounded Federation soldiers. His willingness to sacrifice himself for beings he had never met before represented everything that made humans different from other species. The Harvesters responded to human aggression with tactics they had never needed before. For the first time in the war, they were forced to retreat from battle and regroup their forces. The collective intelligence controlling them seemed unable to process the level of violence that humans brought to every engagement. Dr. Rachel Kim, working with Federation scientists, finally cracked the code of Harvester collective consciousness and discovered how to disrupt their command networks. The aliens wanted to use this knowledge for targeted strikes that would disable enemy units without causing unnecessary destruction, but humans had different plans. Jake Morrison led a strike team deep into the heart of the Nexus Prime facility. While the space battle raged overhead, The processing center was a nightmare of biological and mechanical components that stretched for kilometers beneath the planet's surface. Harvester defenders threw everything they had at the human assault. Force. The fighting inside the facility was brutal even by human standards. Corridors filled with toxic gas and biological weapons that could dissolve metal became battlegrounds where human soldiers proved their reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. Every meter of advance cost lives, but the humans never stopped pushing forward. Admiral Zeth Kara watched the human assault from his flagship and finally understood why the Federation had called Earth for help. The humans fought with an intensity that defied logic and a willingness to accept casualties that seemed insane to alien thinking. They were willing to die to protect people they had never met. The space battle reached its climax when Captain Walsh ordered his ship to ram the primary Harvester command vessel. The UES Devastator's sacrifice opened a gap in enemy defenses that allowed Jake's team to reach the facility's core systems. The explosion was visible from orbit as the massive ship died to ensure the mission's success. Commander Steve Johnson piloted his fighter directly into a Harvester defense platform, knowing he would not survive but ensuring that the facility's shields would fall. His sacrifice was one of thousands, as human forces proved that they would pay any price for victory. Jake and Admiral Zeth Kara worked together to plant charges that would destroy the processing facility from within. The alien engineers' knowledge of Harvester technology combined with human explosives created a weapon that would eliminate the enemy's ability to coordinate their forces across the galaxy. The explosion that destroyed Nexus Prime was recorded by sensors across multiple star systems. The facility that had processed the resources of 60 conquered worlds vanished in a flash of light that marked the beginning of the end for the Harvester Collective. With their central coordination destroyed, the remaining Harvesters fell into chaos as individual units lost contact with the collective intelligence. Human forces, led by Admiral Lisa Barnes, spent the following months hunting down and eliminating every remaining enemy concentration with ruthless efficiency. The final battle of the war took place in orbit around a dead world where the last Harvester ships had gathered for a desperate defense. Human forces showed no mercy as they completed the task they had traveled across the galaxy to accomplish. The enemy that had terrorized civilizations for decades was finally extinct. In the aftermath of victory, the galaxy struggled to comprehend what humanity had accomplished. The peaceful Federation species were grateful for their salvation, but worried about sharing space with beings capable of such organized violence. Humans had proven themselves to be the most dangerous species in galactic history. President Carter addressed both Earth and the Federation in a speech that became known as the Death World Doctrine. She explained that humans fought with such intensity precisely because they valued life and were willing to do whatever was necessary to protect it. Violence was not humanity's nature, but their tool for preserving peace. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the only way to stop evil was through overwhelming force applied without hesitation or mercy. Humanity took their place as the protectors of galactic civilization, while forever changing how the universe understood the relationship between peace and the capacity for war. Jake stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Federation capital and looked out at ships from dozens of species working together to rebuild their shattered worlds. The galaxy was safe, but it would never forget the price of that safety or the species that had been willing to pay it.